The intricate dance of diplomacy between the United States and Iran regarding Tehran's nuclear program spans several decades, marked by periods of cautious engagement, heightened tension, and outright confrontation. Early concerns about Iran's nuclear ambitions surfaced long before the current international focus, with initial US support for Iran's peaceful nuclear energy program under the Shah gradually transforming into suspicion and opposition following the 1979 Islamic Revolution. This shift fundamentally altered the bilateral relationship, casting a long shadow over any subsequent discussions related to nuclear technology. The discovery of clandestine Iranian nuclear activities in the early 2000s significantly escalated international alarm, leading to a series of United Nations Security Council resolutions imposing sanctions aimed at curbing Iran's enrichment capabilities and compelling greater transparency. These early diplomatic efforts were often fraught with complexity, navigating deep-seated mistrust. The diplomatic landscape began to evolve more concertedly in the years leading up to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. Multiple rounds of negotiations involving not just the US and Iran, but also other world powers, the P5+1, China, France, Germany, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, sought to find a formula that would provide assurances about the peaceful nature of Iran's program while acknowledging its right to nuclear energy. These discussions were arduous, reflecting the technical intricacies of nuclear fuel cycles and the profound geopolitical differences between the negotiating parties. Iran consistently maintained its program was for peaceful purposes, while Western powers harbored strong suspicions about potential military dimensions, particularly given past undeclared activities. The challenge was to bridge this gap through verifiable commitments and robust monitoring mechanisms. The pursuit of a comprehensive agreement was driven by a shared desire, albeit for different reasons, to avert a potential military conflict and prevent nuclear proliferation in a volatile region. For Iran, the prospect of sanctions relief offered a pathway to economic recovery and reintegration into the global economy. For the international community, particularly the United States and its allies, the primary goal was to significantly roll back Iran's nuclear capabilities and extend its breakout time, the period it would theoretically take to produce enough fissile material for a nuclear weapon. This delicate balance of interests required innovative diplomatic approaches and a willingness to make difficult compromises on both sides, navigating domestic political opposition that viewed any concession with suspicion. The historical context is crucial for understanding the present-day complexities. The legacy of past grievances, broken promises, perceived or real, and the cyclical nature of US-Iran relations deeply influence the current negotiating climate. Each side approaches the table with a long memory of previous interactions, shaping their strategies, red lines, and levels of trust. The efforts to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, for instance, offer some parallels but also stark differences, highlighting the unique challenges posed by Iran's more advanced indigenous nuclear infrastructure and its distinct regional geopolitical posture. Understanding this long and often tortuous history is fundamental to appreciating the nuances of any attempt to forge a new path forward. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, finalized in the summer of 2015, represented a landmark diplomatic achievement. Negotiated by the Obama administration alongside international partners, its core objective was to place strict, verifiable limits on Iran's uranium enrichment program and other sensitive nuclear activities. In exchange, Iran was to receive relief from crippling international economic sanctions. The agreement meticulously detailed restrictions on the number and types of centrifuges Iran could operate, the level to which it could enrich uranium, capped at 3.67%, and the size of its enriched uranium stockpile. Furthermore, it mandated a comprehensive inspections regime by the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, designed to provide unprecedented access and transparency, thereby ensuring Iran remained at least 1 year away from possessing enough material for a nuclear weapon. Some elements of the deal were time-bound, with certain significant restrictions, known as sunset clauses, scheduled to expire in 2030. However, the JCPOA faced significant political opposition within the United States from its inception. Critics argued that the sunset clauses were a fundamental flaw, merely delaying rather than permanently preventing an Iranian nuclear weapon. Concerns were also raised about the deal not addressing Iran's ballistic missile program or its regional activities, which many viewed as destabilizing. In May 2018, President Donald Trump announced the United States' unilateral withdrawal from the JCPOA, decrying it as a horrible, one-sided deal. This decision led to the immediate reimposition of stringent U.S. sanctions, including secondary sanctions targeting entities doing business with Iran, severely impacting Iran's economy and its ability to trade internationally, particularly its oil exports. The move was met with dismay by other signatories who vowed to try and preserve the agreement. Iran initially sought to uphold its commitments under the JCPOA, hoping that the remaining signatories, particularly European powers, could find ways to mitigate the impact of US sanctions. However, as the promised economic benefits failed to materialize due to the far-reaching effects of American financial pressure, Tehran began to incrementally reduce its compliance. Starting in May 2019, exactly 1 year after the US withdrawal, Iran initiated a series of steps to restart and expand its nuclear activities beyond JCPOA limits. This included increasing its stockpile of enriched uranium, enriching uranium to higher purity levels, and accelerating research and development on advanced centrifuges, significantly shrinking its theoretical breakout time. These actions were carefully calibrated, with Iran stating they were reversible if its economic grievances were addressed. The consequences of the US withdrawal and Iran's subsequent nuclear advancements have been profound. By 2025, Iran had reportedly produced enough near-weapons-grade enriched uranium for multiple warheads and was assessed to be mere days away from producing its first nuclear weapons worth of material, should it choose to do so. The development and deployment of more advanced centrifuges have permanently altered the technical landscape, meaning Iran can achieve more with fewer machines, potentially in harder-to-detect clandestine facilities. Furthermore, after alleged sabotage attacks on its centrifuge infrastructure in 2021, Iran curtailed IAEA access to information regarding the production and storage of centrifuge components, further complicating monitoring efforts and eroding the transparency gains achieved under the JCPOA. Despite the turbulent history and heightened tensions, both Tehran and a hypothetical new Trump administration have demonstrated a consistent mutual interest in exploring a new nuclear deal since early 2025. For the US administration, the motivations are multifaceted. A primary driver is the desire to restore a measure of strategic stability to the Middle East, a region perennially on edge. Successfully negotiating a deal could also significantly bolster the president's image as a consummate dealmaker, capable of resolving intractable international crises. Furthermore, there's an underlying concern that an unconstrained Iranian nuclear program could trigger a regional proliferation cascade, fundamentally altering the security architecture of the Middle East and posing a direct threat to US interests and allies. The alternative, military action, is fraught with immense risks and uncertain outcomes. Iran, on its part, is driven by an urgent need for lasting economic relief from the severe US sanctions that have crippled its economy for years. These sanctions have limited international trade and banking access, undermined key industries, degraded infrastructure, and hampered energy flow. A new agreement promises a pathway to economic recovery, increased manufacturing capacity, and the attraction of foreign investment, which are crucial for domestic stability. Beyond economic imperatives, Tehran also seeks a pause in hostilities and a reduction in regional tensions, especially given that many of its regional proxies have reportedly been weakened over the past 18 months. A deal could provide a much-needed respite and an opportunity to recalibrate its foreign policy posture from a position of somewhat improved economic standing. However, the path to a new agreement is littered with significant sticking points. Core US concerns revolve around the extent and nature of Iran's enrichment program and its continued funding of regional proxies. Washington is demanding the most intense inspections regime possible by the IAEA, covering both declared and undeclared sites, including military facilities. This includes full adherence to the IAEA Safeguards Agreement and its additional protocol. Furthermore, the US insists on robust transparency mechanisms for centrifuges, their location, quantity, and manufacturing pipeline, and for uranium stockpiles, given Iran's advancements in centrifuge technology and its capability to build harder-to-detect clandestine enrichment plants since the JCPOA's erosion. Iran, while expressing a willingness to negotiate, remains deeply reticent to significantly scale back its nuclear program, which it views as a sovereign right and a significant national achievement after years of investment. A key Iranian concern is the durability of any US commitment, given that President Trump unilaterally withdrew from the previous accord. Tehran seeks ironclad guarantees that a future US administration will not renege on a new deal, a challenging proposition in the American political system. There is also strong Iranian resistance to dismantling its enrichment infrastructure entirely, although recent talks have reportedly explored proposals for a temporary freeze on enrichment, potentially for up to 3 years, with Russia possibly supplying fuel for Iran's civilian nuclear program in the interim. Negotiators are exploring various frameworks for a potential new agreement, with a clear US objective to achieve a deal that is demonstrably better and more comprehensive than the 2015 JCPOA. This includes demands for significantly expanded IAEA inspection authorities, not only at declared nuclear sites, but also extending to undeclared locations, potentially including military sites if credible evidence of undeclared nuclear activities emerges. A crucial new element is a more direct approach to weaponization-related work. The US is pushing for Iran to declare any equipment or materials related to nuclear weaponization, as defined by the Nuclear Suppliers Group, and allow for stringent IAEA verification. This addresses concerns heightened by post-2018 discoveries of past undeclared Iranian work at certain sites. The complex issue of sanctions relief lies at the heart of the negotiations, with the US proposing a framework where relief could be tied to the extent of domestic enrichment restrictions Iran accepts, potentially on a sliding scale. If Iran were to agree to a long-term or even permanent cessation of uranium enrichment on its soil, Washington might offer substantial relief from secondary sanctions and some elements of the US embargo. This could, for example, permit trade in commercial manufacturing projects and the energy sector. However, it is highly probable that sanctions related to military and dual-use technology, the activities of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, and Iran's support for regional proxies would remain firmly in place, reflecting enduring US security concerns beyond the nuclear file. Even with carefully calibrated sanctions relief, significant risks remain. A major concern for the US and its regional allies is that even limited new revenues flowing into Iran could be diverted to reconstruct its axis of resistance. The network of proxy groups across the Middle East that have reportedly been battered by Israeli actions over the last 18 months. Increased financial resources could also enable Iran to build up its covert action capabilities, further develop its ballistic missile programs, and expand its naval forces, potentially increasing regional instability. To mitigate these risks, the US is likely to insist that any new deal include explicit restrictions on Tehran exporting or deploying missiles, drones, and other ranged attack vehicles outside its territory, alongside commitments of non-interference in the domestic affairs of other countries. Ultimately, the success of any new agreement will hinge on its verifiability, durability, and its ability to address the core concerns of all parties involved. The implications are vast. A successful deal could de-escalate regional tensions, bolster global non-proliferation norms, and provide Iran with a path toward economic normalization. Conversely, a failure to reach an accord could see Iran continue to advance its nuclear program, potentially pushing it closer to a weapons capability and increasing the likelihood of preemptive military action, which US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has acknowledged would be complex against Iran's more developed capabilities. The ongoing talks, therefore, represent a critical juncture with profound consequences for international peace and security.